Have you ever stared at a world map and noticed something strange? There's this enormous blue emptiness in the middle of the Pacific Ocean. It covers a third of the entire planet. It's bigger than every landmass on Earth combined. And yet, scattered across that impossible void, there are people, millions of them, on tiny specks of land you'd need a magnifying glass to find. So here's the question that should keep you up at night. How did human beings, thousands of years ago, with no metal, no compass, no maps, and no engines, manage to find and settle islands that are literally invisible until you're almost on top of them? This is the story of the greatest exploration in human history, and almost nobody talks about it. Let's set the stage. When you think of great explorers, you probably picture European ships in the 1400s and 1500s, Columbus, Magellan, big wooden galleons crossing the Atlantic. But those voyages, as impressive as they were, came thousands of years too late. Long before any of that, a group of people we now call the Austronesians had already conquered the largest ocean on Earth, and they did it in canoes. To understand how, you have to go back, way back. Around 3,000 to 4,000 years ago, a culture emerged in the islands near New Guinea and the Bismarck Archipelago. Archaeologists gave them a name based on their distinctive pottery, the Lapita. You can actually track these people across the map by following their broken pots. That's not a joke. Their pottery had a unique stamped geometric decoration, and wherever archaeologists dig it up, they know the Lepita passed through. And what the pottery shows is astonishing. In a relatively short window of time, these people spread out across an enormous stretch of the Western Pacific, reaching places like Fiji, Tonga, and Samoa. They were island hopping across open ocean when much of the rest of the world was still figuring out basic agriculture. But here's where it gets truly mind-bending. After reaching Western Polynesia, the expansion paused. For maybe 1,000 years or more, the frontier held roughly still. And then, something changed. Somewhere around 1,000 to 1,200 years ago, a new wave of voyaging exploded outward. This is the phase that produced the settlements at the very edges of the Pacific. And when you look at where they ended up, it defies belief. Picture a gigantic triangle. At the top corner, Hawaii. At the bottom left, New Zealand. And at the far eastern corner, thousands of miles from anywhere, Easter Island. That triangle is called Polynesia, and every side of it is longer than the width of the entire United States. The same people, sharing related languages, related myths, related tools, settled every habitable island inside it. Now stop and really think about the distances involved. To get from the central Pacific to Hawaii, you're crossing more than 2,000 miles of open water. To reach Easter Island, one of the most isolated inhabited places on the planet, you're sailing over 1,000 miles from the nearest island, and that nearest island is itself a tiny dot. These are not coastal hops where you can see the next shore. For days, sometimes weeks, there is nothing. No land, no landmarks, just water in every direction, all the way to the horizon, hour after hour, night after night. And they did it on purpose, again and again. So how? How do you find a target you cannot see that might be a few miles wide in an ocean that spans a third of the globe? This is where the genius comes in. And it's not magic. It's science, memorized and passed down through generations without a single written word. Start with the stars. Polynesian navigators developed what's often called a star compass. They memorized the points on the horizon where specific stars rise and set. As one star climbed too high to be useful, they'd switch to the next star rising behind it along the same bearing. String those together through the night, and you hold a steady course across hundreds of miles of blackness. Some navigators are said to have known the rising and setting positions of well over 100 stars. But stars only work at night, and only when the sky is clear, so they read the ocean itself. This is maybe the most incredible part. The navigators learned to feel the swells. Out in the open Pacific, ocean swells are generated by distant, steady wind systems, and they roll in consistent directions for enormous distances. A trained navigator could lie down in the hull of the canoe and feel the pattern of swells passing beneath the boat, using their own body as an instrument. When multiple swell trains crossed, they created a subtle interference pattern, and a skilled reader could hold direction by that alone, even under total cloud cover, with no stars at all. And they read the living world too. They watched the flight paths of birds. Certain seabirds fly out to sea to feed in the morning and return to land at dusk. So spotting one at the right time could point you toward an island still below the horizon. They noticed the way waves bend and bounce off unseen land, changing the pattern of the water far offshore. They watched cloud formations, because clouds pile up over islands, and a bright greenish tint on the underside of a cloud can be sunlight reflecting off a shallow lagoon. They tracked drifting debris and shifts in the water's color. Every sense was an instrument. The entire ocean was a text, and they had learned to read it. Now, the vessels. Forget the image of a single hollowed-out log. The great voyaging canoes were double-hulled, 2 long hulls lashed together with a platform between them, carrying a crab-claw sail. This design was fast, stable in heavy seas, and could carry serious cargo, and that cargo is the whole point of the story. These weren't reckless, one-way suicide runs. They were expeditions of colonization. On board, they carried the tools to build a new world. Pigs, chickens, dogs, taro, yams, breadfruit, banana, coconut. They brought their crops and their animals because they intended to arrive somewhere empty and make it home. That's planning on a scale that should completely change how you picture these people. For a long time, skeptical Western scholars refused to accept it. They argued that people without instruments couldn't possibly navigate deliberately across such distances. The islands, they said, must have been settled by accident, by fishermen blown off course, drifting randomly until they got lucky. It was a convenient theory, and it was wrong. In 1976, a double-hulled canoe called Hokulea set out to prove it, using no modern instruments at all. Guided by a traditional navigator reading the stars, the swells, and the birds, it sailed from Hawaii all the way to Tahiti, over 2,000 miles, and it arrived. That single voyage, repeated many times since, shattered the accident theory and helped spark a full revival of traditional navigation across the Pacific. There's one more twist that makes the whole thing even richer. Remember Easter Island, the far eastern point of the triangle? Beyond it lies South America, and on those far-flung Polynesian islands, archaeologists have found the sweet potato, a plant native to the Americas. Its very name in parts of Polynesia echoes a name used for it in South America. The most likely explanation is staggering. Polynesian voyagers may have reached the coast of South America, thousands of miles east of anything else they knew, and carried the sweet potato back across the ocean to plant on their islands. If that's true, these navigators didn't just fill in a triangle. They touched 2 continents, and they did it centuries before Columbus was even born. So let's come back to that map, that vast, empty blue expanse that looks like the least conquerable place on Earth. For most of human history, it was the ultimate frontier, an ocean so wide it swallows continents, and a people with no metal, no writing, and no instruments looked out at it. Not with fear, but with ambition. They read the stars and the swells and the birds. They built canoes strong enough to carry a whole civilization, and they sailed into the unknown over and over until the largest ocean on the planet was no longer empty. It was home. So the next time someone tells you the great age of exploration began in Europe 500 years ago, remember the navigators who lay in the hulls of their canoes, feeling for islands they could not see. Thousands of years earlier, they didn't just cross the largest ocean on Earth, they conquered it, and they did it by turning the entire sea into a map they carried inside their heads.